But I guess the topic I do want to get into ties to what we're talking about because the Eagles won the Super Bowl in a dominant fashion. Okay, dominant fashion. Going into this next season, Lions have an offseason. The Eagles have an offseason. The Eagles got to re-sign, like you mentioned, Zach Bond or Josh Sweat, who are both very good players. But I guess the conversation I'm going to dive into is not just are the Eagles the team to beat in the NFC, because they are, but how do you think the Lions match up with a team like that, and what do they have to do to be able to take a team like that down next season? Where would you guys go, Klotzy? What do you think about it? Matching up with the Eagles after an offseason.
I mean, looking at the Eagles, the thing is, they're not going anywhere. They're in a very similar situation with the Detroit Lions. Jalen Hurts is on a part of his contract where it's really not eating them up to, I believe, 2027. Jared Goff's contract really isn't kicking in. They got both of the receivers signed. They're not going anywhere. Saquon's going to be back. Lane Johnson, he might be gone, but when you look at their offensive line, they'll figure it out. Philadelphia never fails to have a bad offensive line. Offensively, I do think the Lions have an advantage because especially when you look at just the pure talent there, I think the Lions on paper, I like what they have at the skill positions more, especially when it comes down to Laporta and Dallas Goedert. But when you just look at it, the defensive side of the ball, you can't argue there isn't a gap. When you look at Zach Bond, I'd imagine he's probably going to be franchise tag. There's no way you bring a guy in who was not off the streets, but was off of special teams. I believe he's in New Orleans. And then you bring him in and he's an all-pro. They're not going to let him walk. They're probably going to let Milton Williams walk. That's fine. You have Jordan Davis. Josh Sweat came out and said he really doesn't have any intentions of leaving Philly. He's not going to command a lot of money. He'll be fine. Just get another Super Bowl ring. He's been there for a while. The Lions, the only weakness that they have compared to it is the front seven, but it's the most important spot because the Philadelphia, they have young guys. The Detroit Lions, Alex Anzalone is probably the best linebacker that they have, older guy. The Philadelphia, like we just talked about, Zach Bond behind him. They got Nakobe Dean, who's hurt, but he's really starting to pick up. Between Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith, at their rookie years, they were both kind of like, okay, are both these guys misses? But in the second year, they turned it up and they turned into really good players. Safety and probably Aiden Hutchinson defensively is the only advantage that the Detroit Lions have. I understand that that Kelvin Shepard could bring a lot, but I don't see Vic Fangio's going anywhere. I mean, he just got a Super Bowl ring. He's not going to be a head coach anytime soon. Besides that point, like he's up there in age, so they're probably going to keep Vic Fangio around for a while. So they're going to have the number one defense again in the NFC. You have to find offensively a way to match that. You got to keep the offensive line strong. Detroit does have the only offensive line that can match up with Philadelphia's defensive line consistently. I think the Chiefs' offensive line is good, but that's obviously an elite defensive line across from you. The Lions do have an elite offensive line. I think they're pound for pound on the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, there's a little bit of a gap between the Lions and the Eagles, and especially when you look at Cooper DeJean, pick six, rookie, 22 years old, Quinyon Mitchell, rookie. They're going to have the corner advantage for a while as well, so there's a massive gap, I think, when it comes down to personnel long-term between the Lions and the Eagles right now.
Yeah, I mean, Klotz is spot on. I do think, like when you look at it, just the biggest thing going into this season for the Lions, like we know the players and what they have, and when injuries come back, the guys that are injured come back, especially defensively, you're going to find out quickly. Like, I think the biggest thing, honestly, just the biggest concern with it is like, how is Kelvin Shepard going to adjust to being the DC? And John Morton as well. Like, how is Johnny Morton going to kind of adjust to being the OC and that staff? Like, I think that's the two biggest like question marks for me going into the season. You have two new coordinators. Like you saw 2 years ago, the Eagles go to the Super Bowl, lose both coordinators, bring in two new guys. And then they have the year that they did. They had a great regular season, but towards the back half, you saw things kind of fall apart. I think that's the biggest thing going into this year. And the Eagles, like, I mean, they're almost in a similar situation. Like Vic Fangio, he's going to probably be back, but they're losing Kellen Moore. And like they're offensively, like, they do have the weapons just like the Lions do. It's just like you're going to have to hope that, hey, you find an OC that's going to be able to come in and make a statement and kind of help that offense continue to do what they did last year with Saquon. And it's easy because you have Saquon. I think for the Johnny Mo show here in Detroit, you have Jameer, you have Demont, you have Amon-Ra, you have J-Mo, you have the best offensive line. Same thing in the Philly. So I just think going into next year, boys, I don't think, like, if I'm just being quite frankly, like, yeah, the Eagles are the defending Super Bowl champs. Like, going into next year, like, yes, they are the team to beat. Everyone knows that. Like, anytime you play the defending Super Bowl champs and they're in your division or in your conference, like, yeah, that's your team to beat. Like, you want to prove that you're better than them because they just won it. Just like in college football, Michigan wins a natty. The next year, Ohio State, like, they want to beat Michigan, and there's a conversation. They couldn't beat them, and it's like, oh, well, they still won the championship, though. So it's like, to me, it's the same thing here in Detroit. I still think the Lions are right here. If you make a move like edge rusher and you kind of build up this team and get more pieces this offseason, those are the best two teams in football, and the Chiefs. And those are the top three teams in football. Like, I don't think that next year the Lions are going to have a big drop off. I still think they're going to be a top 5 team from week 1 to the playoffs. And depending if you have them at 5, at 1, at 2, at 3, they're just going to fluctuate. They have one of the tougher schedules. But the Eagles, like, they're up there now. Like, there were times this year, boys, where we had the Eagles at 7, the Eagles at 6 in our power rankings. Like, no, like, we know now the roster they have, they're up there. And it's the same with the Lions. Even though the Lions lost in their first round, in the divisional round, that's still a team that a lot of NFL teams look around and go, I don't want to play this Lions team. They're unbelievable. Like, this roster is stacked top to bottom.
Yeah, the thing, I think the Lions, are they the team to beat? The Philadelphia Eagles? Absolutely they are. And how do you beat them? You have to be able to get after Jalen Hurts. And you saw the Chiefs, like Steve, like Spags is the best blitzing DC in the league. And they struggled to get to Jalen Hurts consistently. Chris Jones was double teamed. They ran out of answers. The play calls where they did get to him, there was a penalty. So there was other mistakes too. But they're going to have to get after him. And guess what? He's got the best offensive line protecting him, or at least the top 2. So it's going to be difficult. You're going to be squaring off with a team that has just as good of an offensive line as you do. So what does that mean? That's why it ties back to you have to get more guys on the defensive line, specifically in the first round here, or via trade or via free agency, whatever it is, because you got to be able to make Jalen uncomfortable. They're already really good at stopping the run. That's been the identity of this defense over the last couple of years. But if you can't get to them, you are cooked. Because you saw last night Jalen in that pocket sitting there chilling. He's completing passes that even I doubted that Jalen Hurts can make consistently. And he showed that even guys like me that were critical of him were wrong. Like, if he's protected, he'll make you pay. And Saquon didn't run for a bunch of yards yesterday either.
They shut Saquon out last night.
That's the thing. And that's why it's so important, because we talk about it all the time with the Lions offensive line. It travels. Anywhere they go, it travels. Same thing with defensive lines, man. No matter the weather, it travels. You play in Philly next year, that defensive line will travel. It's the same thing. So again, would you like it to be in Ford Field? Of course. But even if it's not, that's going to be the key to taking down the Eagles. It's not just stopping the run, but on these 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and long, whatever it is, you got to be able to get after them. You got to be able to create pressure, because they still got guys on their offensive line, great players, like Hall of Fame players. So that's going to be the challenge for them. And of course, I want to help out my rookie defensive coordinator. So I'd like it to get him more talent. But that's really the big thing. The secondary, of course, but I'm assuming they're going to re-sign Carlton. I'm assuming, again, Terrion's going to take that next step.
Yes.
So it really comes down to, hey, what's that front 7 look like?
There are still, like, that's the thing. I think there's, like, people in like, again, this is where it's like we had the criticism of the edge and Brad Holmes looking at it and seeing what the D-line did last night. People forget, though, like, they still have a great defense. Like, that defense, when those guys, like, Anzo healthy, Hutch back healthy, Aleem back healthy, like, all these guys back healthy, and when this defense has all of their pieces, it's great. And then if these points, it's like if you add more to this defense, it could be a top 5 defense next year. Like, Kelvin Shepherd's going to have a top 5 roster, top 5 defense. Can he get it to the top 5? We'll see. We don't know. It's a rookie coordinator. Same offensively. Like, will John Morton be able to keep that offense in the top 5? I don't know. We'll see, and we'll figure it out. But yeah, that's what I think they're going to be just fine next year. I've talked to a lot of people. There's people who do think like Super Bowl window's over, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm not going to go and say that stuff. Like, again, there's a point where, I'm not just up here spitting out haterade. I'm talking about things that I do think Brad needs to improve on. But if I'm keeping it a buck, like I always try and do, window's still open. Is it going to get harder over the next couple of years? Yes, it will, guys, because guys are going to start getting paid. That's just the truth. So, unfortunately, it will get harder, and you're going to have to really rely on the draft to supplement players leaving, because it's going to be hard to keep everybody. That's why this next 2-year window, I'd like to see Brad be a little more aggressive, whether that's in the draft or, via trade. Because after a while, it's going to be hard unless you restructure. You'll probably be able to restructure Goff's contracts, so on and so forth. But yes, the window is still open. Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, officialctsports.com.